Okay, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Pensions Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view the meeting using the link on the agenda. And if we could just introduce ourselves around the room, please. Sarah, you want to start?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Sarah Townsend and I'm the clerk to the committee.
I'm Philip Hudson. I'm the independent advisor to the committee.
Good morning. I'm Pete Judson. I'm the Pensions Investment and Responsible Investment Manager.
Councillor Gary Groves, Chair of the Pensions Committee.
Morning, James Walton, Director, Executive Director, Section 151 Officer for the Council, the administering authority for Shropshire County Pension Funds.
Vicky Jenks, Pensions Administration Manager.
Luke Hammond from Aon, Investment Advisor to the committee.
John Cartwright from Aon, Investment Advisor to the committee.
Grant Patterson, Director of Grant Thornton, the external auditors of the pension fund.
John Hall, Acting Chair of the Pension Board.
Good morning, Councillor Malcolm Miles Hook, representing the Priest Division.
Good morning, Charles Shagley Bennett. I'm a councillor representing the Quay ward.
Councillor Fiona Doran, Telford and Wrekin. I'm substituting for Zoe Harrington this morning.
Thank you. There are people joined online as well. And if we take item 1 first, apologies and substitutions. So we've received apologies from Zon Annington and Fiona is covering as substitute. Paul Griffiths, employee representative, and Byron Cook, employee representative, I think is attending remotely. Yeah.
Yeah. Also been informed, Chair, that Paul Davis is on his way, but might be a bit late. Okay,
thank you. Item 2, disclosure of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare a disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable, non-registrable interests in any matter being considered at the meeting as set out in Appendix B of the Members' Code of Conduct and consider if they should leave the room prior to the item being considered. Are there any interests, disclosable interests? No. Item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of June. Everybody had a chance to go through the minutes? Can we take those as an accurate account of the meeting? Yeah. Those I'll second. All those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4, public questions. So we've had 2 public questions have been received. Dr. Jamie Russell and Ms. Joanna Blackman. Dr. Jamie Russell, please. It's the right hand button. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much, councillors. Earlier this month, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, PSC, issued a legal notice to all councils in England and Wales overseeing a local government pension scheme, LGPS fund. This includes Shropshire Council and Telford and Wrekin Council. The notice, written by legal experts, outlines that councils must, quote, take steps to divest from companies enabling and profiting from Israel's genocide, military occupation and apartheid against Palestinians, end quote, and the legal risks of not doing so. This includes armed companies supplying the Israeli state with weapons which may be used to commit violations of international law, such as the Geneva Conventions and the Genocide Convention, and companies involved in the financing and construction of Israel's illegal settlements on Palestinian land. The £2 billion Shropshire County Pension Fund invests over £142 million in these companies. These companies include Northrop Grumman, which supplies the Israeli Air Force with missile delivery systems for its fighter jets and helicopters, and Honeywell, which supplies components for bombs, missiles and drones used against Palestinian civilians, including infants and children. There are many others. Please can you tell me, firstly, if the fund plans to divest from companies complicit in genocide in accordance with international law? Number 2, if such divestment requires a vote from full council? And number 3, what the legal implications would be for the fund, its officers and pension committee members if the fund is found to be complicit in genocide. Thank you.
And the response will be read by Peter Chatterton.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. I'm going to respond to your question in the three parts that you've raised. In respect to part one, the fund confirms it received a letter and legal opinion from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, along with a number of other pension authorities in the. Sorry. Yeah, I'll start again. So we'll respond to the question in three parts. Part one, the fund confirms it's received the letter and legal opinion from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, along with a number of other pension authorities within the local government pension scheme. The fund has a detailed statement on dealing with companies in conflict-affected and high-risk areas, and this is included as Appendix D to the public papers at item 8, and covers the letter received. The fund has referred the matter to the Scheme Advisory Board, as the legal opinion within the letter is contradictory to the legal opinion obtained by the Scheme Advisory Board for funds in November 2024. The Scheme Advisory Board has now referred the matter to central government for clarity on the position, and further guidance is awaited. In respect to question 2, the Pensions Committee have control of the fund, and whilst decisions of full council can be considered, they are not binding upon the Pensions Committee. And in response to question 3, as advised under the response to part 1, the fund is currently seeking further legal advice through the Scheme Advisory Board and central government on any implications of the latest legal opinion, noting that it is contrary to the legal opinion received by the fund itself in November 2024.
Okay, and the second public question we've got is from Miss Joanna Blackman. Could you just put your microphone on, and then members of the public who are right hand button, silver button. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
In July 2020, Shropshire Council voted to divest the £2 billion pension fund from fossil fuels. 18 months later, in January 2022, the Pension Fund Committee voted to ignore the wishes of full council. Today, the fund remains invested in companies that are directly responsible for pushing our climate towards collapse, with huge implications for Shropshire as well as the rest of the world. The Liberal Democrats have a long history of supporting divestment from fossil fuels in pension funds. This includes initiatives and efforts by individual councillors and groups like the Association of Liberal Democrat Councillors and Campaigners to encourage councils to stop investing in fossil fuels. Will the new Pensions Committee, chaired by the Liberal Democrats, commit to divesting the fund from fossil fuel companies which are not aligned with the Paris Agreement?
Okay, thank you. And the response will be read by Peter.
Thank you for the question. And the response is, the Pensions Committee is an apolitical committee and all members have been made aware of this position as part of their induction. The local government pension scheme is set out in legislation and members are required to act in the best interests of the fund. The fund provides committee members with full training on both the pensions regulations as set out by the pensions regulator and their fiduciary responsibility in respect of their role on the pensions committee to ensure that they are able to meet the objectives set out in the terms of reference within the governance compliance statement. The fund has a transparent strategy in place to reach net zero by 2050 in line with the Paris Agreement on climate change. This strategy is regularly reviewed and the fund issues an annual update on climate impacts of investments annually each year. The latest climate risk report from November 2024 is available on the fund's website and shows that the fund, through responsible investment practices, has reduced its carbon footprint measured by normalised finance emissions by 63.1% since 2020 and 62.9% on a weighted average carbon intensity basis.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 5, and I think we're going to take items 5, 6 and 7 together. So Adam, I think you're in attendance remotely. If you could take us through 5, please.
Sorry, Chair, before we start, may I just make a comment, please? We've been sent out 538 pages for this committee to review. I've had shorter novels that I've read. It's a lot of information. I find it very difficult to be able to actually digest all of that information and be actually able to add real value to proving that some of that information in this committee. I know we are asked to endorse some of the papers. There are some of them which I can't endorse because there are some errors in the papers, etc., which we can point out as we go through. So I'm not sure why we have so much information for this committee, and particularly for myself and maybe other councillors as well. So I think it's just too much information. My concern is that we're just being inundated with data and information, and so we don't really get a chance to do a real detailed investigation in depth. So my thought is whether we need to at some point review what we get, review what's discussed here, maybe try and slim down the level of information we get so we can actually provide real scrutiny on the overall set of papers. Thank you.
Charles.
Yeah, I can second that. I've been through that report and it is a very lengthy one. I simply haven't had time to digest all the material in it and to analyse it properly. I think what we need is more time between the publication of such a report and the meeting to consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I did speak at the pre-agenda meeting with officers about this because I had concerns myself, and it's something that we'll take back and we'll look at for future agendas. I do understand that 18 items is a lot, and as like we're looking at 5, 6 and 7, we're going to take as one because it all will link into each other as well. So okay, but we will take your comments on board. Thank you. Right, sorry, Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, I'm Adam Williams, the Principal Auditor for Shropshire Council, and I'll be overseeing the audit plan for the pension fund for 25-26, and we'll be presenting the annual opinion report for the work completed in the previous financial year. If you do have any questions, I will endeavour to answer them during the meeting. However, if there are any points that require further clarification, I will make a note of them and get back to you after the committee. I do apologise to members, as I am aware there are a couple of typos on this report, but I will provide clarification as part of this presentation. The purpose of this report is to provide members with details of the work we undertook in the previous financial year. Work undertaken is agreed annually as part of developing a risk-based audit plan, which is reviewed regularly with management to ensure we have audit coverage against key risks. As part of this plan, we undertake audits that are designed to provide a reasonable chance of discovering weaknesses in internal controls. This is undertaken through the testing of controls and obtaining evidence to demonstrate the controls are in place and operating effectively. However, we cannot guarantee absolute assurance against all risks. We have undertaken a total of 6 assurance engagements in 24-25, covering the following areas. Pensions administration, which is the largest audit we undertake for the pension fund, focusing on the administrative controls for managing pensions, including recording of contributions, benefits being paid and transfers in and out of the scheme. Corporate governance, which is reviewing the governance processes in place to manage the pension fund, including reporting requirements. Risk management, reviewing the risk management arrangements in place. pension fund monitoring, reviewing the arrangements for overseeing the pension fund investments, the investment manager's internal control reports, which is again reviewing the arrangements that the pension fund has for collecting and monitoring the reports they receive. And finally, the Altair application follow-up review, which is an IT audit focusing on the IT system used by the pension fund. For 24-25, we followed up previous audit recommendations, but also reviewed the post-implementation of the new Engage platform. Full details of the controls being reviewed are provided for members as part of Appendix A on page 10, agenda page 16. The report presented today is the annual opinion we provide to the Pensions Committee, summarising our work for the 24-25 audit plan and our opinion on the fund's overall control environment. Point 3 on the report, page 2, asks that the committee considers and endorses the performance against the plan for the year that ended on the 31st of March 2025, as well as the Chief Executive's annual opinion on the pension fund's internal control environment for 24-25. I will now run through the key points of the report I would like to draw to the committee's attention. Okay. Turning to page 5 of the report, agenda page 11, I can confirm that based on the work undertaken in 24-25, that the pension fund's governance, risk management and control processes are sound and working effectively, and therefore we are able to offer a substantial opinion. Members should note that this is the highest opinion we can offer on the effectiveness of controls reviewed. Turning to page 6, agenda page 12, the annual opinion we have delivered is based on a total of 6 assurance reviews in 24-25, which are summarised in the table. All audits undertaken received a positive good opinion. And turning to the bottom of page 6 of the report, agenda page 12, the table summarises the recommendations raised during the work completed. Please note there is an error on the table where it shows that the totals were 10. I can confirm that this was 8 as shown in the previous columns. Members should note that no significant or fundamental recommendations have been made during our work, which would highlight significant control weaknesses or areas where immediate action is required. All recommendations were assessed as requires attention, which relate to minor weaknesses or housekeeping issues for management to resolve. Members should note that our work did not identify any significant risks that require action. And finally, I want to draw to committee's attention the feedback we received from management regarding the audits undertaken. We received 3 survey forms back as part of our review, which have all been scored positively. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to 6.
Sorry, can I just a couple of comments on that. It's not just the table that was wrong. There's also the section 717 says all 10 of the recommendations. So it sort of implied to me that there were 10 and 2 of them were taken out. And this sort of goes back to my previous point. You know, if the authors of this sort of level of detail haven't done basic checking of information, then what hope do we have on that? And the other thing I just want to ask about, again, on the feedback survey forms, you said, so that above the table, this is on page 14, section 722, it says, the text says 5 survey forms were returned. The table then says 3 forms were returned. But I'd like to know how many were sent out. Do we know?
All audits will have a feedback form attached to them, so it will be 6 that were sent out and 3 were returned. Right,
okay. And do we know why the others were not returned? Or because, I mean, you know, 3 forms returned, I mean, albeit 100% is very good, so well done for that, but it's hardly a huge sample size if it's only 3 forms returned.
I don't have the reasons they weren't returned, no, sorry. No, and it is a small population as well as a whole. So yeah, it's something we can obviously work on in the next year of future audits to ensure that we get a higher return rate on those surveys.
Thank you.
Item 6.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on, this is the external audit report or interim audit findings report for the pension fund audit for 24-25. It's interim in the sense of I cannot issue my opinion on the pension fund accounts until the council audit is finished, and that's still in progress. So that's why it's badged as interim at this point in time. Presenting this to yourselves as audit committee on the 9th, or pensions committee on the 19th. It will also be going to audit committee on the 26th as well. So in the way that the governance process works is we do the detailed work. You've got the annual report and accounts in front of you today. Our opinion covers the financial statements within that, and then those financial statements are also within the council's accounts, on which we issue opinion. So the idea of this audit findings report is we've looked at the financial statements within the annual report, which are the same as among the council accounts, and to give our overview of the work that we've undertaken. We've not had to change our overall audit strategy from what we reported to you at planning. So the only thing we have changed is that when we've got the draft financial statements, because we base our planning on last year's numbers, we looked at the figures, the outturn figures for 2025, and they are slightly larger, i.e. you've got more, your value of your investments is higher, and your expenditure going through the fund account is higher. We have therefore amended our materialities, and the new materiality that we worked to as part of the final accounts work was 38.75 million for the net asset statement. So that's primarily looking at your assets. And then we set a lower specific materiality of 14.25 million for the fund account, and that's 10% of your expenditure. So we do that because we believe that members will be interested in the expenditure going through that potentially as a sort of pensions payable and also contributions coming in. So if I take you to effectively, I suppose it's page, I think it's 33 and 34 where the headlines are. In summary, we've not identified any adjustments required by the financial statements that impact upon the pension fund's reported financial position. We have identified £4.5 million of unadjusted differences in the valuation of the fund's investments that are disclosed in statements. We do recognise that it's primarily to do with the timing of when you receive capital statements from the fund managers, that when you have to prepare your accounts. So as auditors, we have the benefit of hindsight, and I think I've said this at a number of committees. So there's a difference between what you estimated at when you close the accounts down and the final figures that have actually come through to you. It's 4.5 million, which I think is something like 0.17% of the actual fund. So it's a very small number. Management, therefore, aren't proposing to adjust for that in the financial statements on the basis of it's not material either qualitatively or quantitatively, and won't impact upon a reader's decision making when it comes to reading the accounts. Within the pack, there's also a letter of representation. That specific item about the unadjusted statements is a representation. It's a letter of representation that the pension committee we're asking to approve and recommend for James, as Section 141 officer, to sign. We did identify a small number of classification and disclosure changes in terms of the accounts. They are actually on pages 55 to 57 of your pack. I won't go through them in detail because they are minor disclosure changes. We've also, and then picking up, I suppose, in the way from what we just said about internal audit, we've not raised any recommendations from management as a result of our audit work this year. We found no issues that we need to bring to your attention. And also our follow-up recommendation from the prior year, which are detailed on page 58 of your pack, we can confirm that both those matters have been addressed by the fund and are now closed. So our audit work is substantially complete, and therefore my anticipated opinion on your financial statements will therefore be an unqualified opinion. Slight caveat to that is on one element of the work that is outstanding is you're in the LGBS Central Pool. Some of their level 3 assets, they have audited accounts that are done at the end of the financial year. The last audited financial statements that currently are at the end of 31st March 24. We are potentially expecting the audited accounts for 31st March 25 to appear at some point. I'm satisfied with the work we've done to date. There is no issues with evaluation in the account. If those audited accounts show something different, I may have to come back to you. It's unusual that happens, and very unlikely it'll be a material issue. But I can't say without actually, if they do appear before we issue the opinion, then I will have to come back to you on that and let you know. But it'd be very unlikely to impact upon the opinion from prior year's experience. Also, in terms of that, and I think I recognise members' comments around what's in the actual pack. You've got the full annual report in the pack, and we do give a separate opinion on the annual report and accounts. We give a consistency opinion on that. So my primary work is on the pension fund accounts that are in the council's accounts. They are in the annual report and accounts, but therefore we issue a separate opinion that says the accounts in the council's accounts are consistent with in the annual report and accounts. So we're proposing again to issue a sort of unqualified consistency opinion. As part of that, we do read the information in the annual report and accounts, but we don't audit it. So we read it to say, do we understand it? Is it in line with our cumulative audit knowledge and experience? We've got no issues with the other information in the annual report and accounts, but we've not done a detailed audit of it in that sense. I suppose just taking you through in terms of the risks we did identify at planning. The two significant risks we identified were management override controls. That is a given risk within the auditing standards. And we had no issues. We primarily work on journals, no issues to report to you about their work on journals. And in terms of the other risk, that was around evaluation of what are called level 3 investments. They're the hard to value ones, and there's not a market for them. You can't easily go to the FT and pick up a price. Again, we've undertaken work on that, and we're satisfied with the estimation process that the fund has gone through. And so apart from that, I suppose what you might call stale pricing, timing difference, that's the only issue we've identified to date. Picking up again, I think, on what to a certain extent what internal audit do, we're also required to look at the IT environment, and our team looked at the IT environment. And if you look on page 56 of your pack, which is page 26 of our report, you can see that there's a sort of sea of green from the areas we've been looking at in terms of IT controls. So again, no matter to bring to your attention. The one slight, probably just to bring to your attention in terms of where your accounts differ from the accounting standards, is that within the financial instruments notes, you actually put a line in that also includes non-financial instruments, and that's to ensure that from your perspective, you can then reconcile the numbers back to the asset statement. So it is quite clear that they are non-financial instruments. You quite clearly state that. So in my view, whilst it's not strictly in line with the accounting standards, it's clear to a reader of the accounts, and therefore I don't think they're being misled. So we're not asking it to be changed in that sense. And we understand what you're trying to do to actually help readers, because if they're trying to reconcile the numbers in the accounts, they could sort of get confused about that. Just in final bits of the audit, no significant independence issues to bring to your attention. We've received one additional request for assurances from a non-NAO body, which does impact upon our audit fee in terms of the IS-19 assurances, and that's from Star Housing, so it's a usual one going through that. I would just note for your attention that you're in the LGPS Central Pool. We actually are the auditors of their service auditors report, their AAF report. It's a different team to that. I don't have any influence over what they do. So they're the team that gives an opinion on the AAF report. So we're satisfied that we're sufficiently independent from them. It doesn't conflict upon my work when it comes to looking at your financial statements. So in a way, I'm then happy to take questions.
I'm just conscious of that comment around LGPS Central and the flow of information. Just as we move forward, I think it's going to be quite important that they sharpen up the act, as it were, feeding that information through to you. They're going to be a bigger and bigger part of what this fund is about. And actually thinking about it is also something which will probably be a common issue for the other partner funds as well. So I do think that small issue at this stage, but could become a bigger issue going forward, needs to be taken back to LGPS Central. Not a big deal, as you're saying, but nevertheless, I think if there's a little bit of a weakness, let's address it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual in the sector. I mean, I can't speak for LGPS Central. I mean, basically, to a certain extent, as auditor, having audited accounts as at the end of March 25 is better than having them at the end of, say, December 24, because you don't have to bring it forward. But there is also, I mean, in terms of the time it takes to get those audited, I mean, we're only sort of 6 months or 5-6 months out, so that it's not that there's a delay in the audit. But as we look to bring the audit dates forward, then potentially this is a challenge for us. However, as I say, we have undertaken, I suppose, alternate audit procedures to date, and I'm comfortable with the figures. So I think that'll be a challenge for all auditors as we go forward. If we look to bring the audit dates forward, that some of these accounts are hard to value. So and the audited accounts won't be available. So I think it's not just a challenge for LGPS. I think us as auditors will need to look at how we get our assurance going forward as well. And there are ways of doing that. We do the look back test, as we say, look at previous audited accounts, compare that to a capital statement. And basically what we're doing there is assessing whether we believe that the investment manager has the competent skills to value accurately. And that's the test we tend to do. And we've not had any issues with that. We have tolerances we set. So that'll be probably something we build upon. And that service auditors report as well, that they have their own processes in place for valuations. But I do accept it would be really good if they could get their audited accounts done quicker. But, you know, there's a process to go through that all auditors need to go through. So.
Okay, that moves us on to
Sorry, Karen, here you go. Yeah, just a couple of things on the audit risks, please. So page 38, the little table. I'm more used to seeing risks done by impact and probability rather than impact and complexity. But leaving that to one side, obviously, I note that the two significant risks that you've highlighted, the management override of controls and the level 3 investments, and you know those risks. So who owns the mitigation and contingency actions to reduce those risks? And it's an open question. I don't know if anyone around this table will then can take actions to reduce those so that next year those are no longer significant, but they've moved to the left and downwards.
One, I can't move. I can't move management override of control. I mean, that's why we don't, in a way, do a scoring matrix, because under the auditing standards, it is always deemed to be a significant risk.
So nobody can do anything about it.
Well, you have controls in place. I suppose in a way.
I'm not saying you would do it. I'm just saying.
No. I think the council has appropriate measures in place. I have to assume they are not working.
I'll just bring James in.
Yeah.
So this is a standard risk. So, and the important point is it's a risk. So ultimately what this is saying is that in any system, anywhere, no matter what you do, whatever you say, somebody has to have overall control that can get into that system and do things. So it's a non-rebuttable risk in that sense. So no matter what we say, Grant has to audit it because there is no possible way out of that risk disappearing. What the work of the team do is they will look to see what controls there are around that. So this could be, for example, that if somebody has access into a certain part of the system, there is always a second check before that actually is done, that a report is taken out that demonstrates any transactions that an individual has done or whatever. That doesn't take away the risk. What it does is it demonstrates what we're trying to do to manage that risk. The opinion that's given by Grant Thornton is whether those processes that are in place are sufficient to be able to manage that risk. But just to be clear, this will appear forevermore as a significant risk, because it is a significant risk, because that's just the very nature of it. I hope that helps.
It does, and that's exactly what I'd expect. Sorry, but so where are those actions documented, identified? Where do we, maybe not even this committee, does somebody then look at those actions and all the things you said? Absolutely, 100% agree with. But how do we assure ourselves, and we collective we, that those are the right things that are being taken into consideration?
Well, firstly, I mean, as I said earlier, we haven't identified from our work. I mean, what we do is pick up on James' point, is we will do a risk assessment of where, against that particular risk, is where do you think that risk might emerge. And as I think I said, in planning, journals is where we see that. Because if someone's going to manipulate the accounts, how will they hide what they have done, in inverted commas? So we focus on the journals work. So we've looked at your arrangements in that, and you have a preparer and authorizer for the journal. So it takes two people to do it. We've looked at those journals. So we look at the process, but we also then look at the journal itself to gain assurance that actually, yes, it is consistent with what we were expecting to see. So we've done all that work, and we've not identified any risks. So on an annual basis, though, we will look at that what you might see in other reports is, picking up on that, your IT report is really good. It is not unusual sometimes to see IT reports where maybe there's administration access for people who you wouldn't expect to have like that. So what we would then do is focus tests on those either individuals or those processes. So then there might be a recommendation coming out to say you need to look at the segregation of duties issues around this, or these people should not be doing that. So from our work, we've not identified anything that within the council that you need to do. And I suppose in a way that's coherent with what internal audit have also been saying in their reports, that they've had no similar issues. So that would be the driving force. At the moment, I don't think there's any actions apart from the clearly internal audit have made some not high priority recommendations for improvement. That's where you, in my view, where you would follow it through. We haven't identified anything that we feel you need to address for next year. In terms of level 3, there'll always be an inherent risk within the level 3 valuations, because the investment managers will be making assumptions around final outturns. So again, it is very unlikely that will reduce in risk, because there's not much a fund can do about that to a certain extent. What it can do, it clearly through when it appoints those investment managers, which is you've been done on yourselves, or now go through the pool, you want to get satisfied that they have appropriate arrangements in place. So you get your assurance through there, and then we would look at the valuations as they come through. So that's looking at the valuations, it's not looking at the operation of the investment manager per se, but it's what's the year-end figure. Again, it's unlikely for that will reduce. And the way that's why we're trying to do it pictorial here, because I think audit risk are slightly different to, I suppose, management operational risk, which you can look at in a different way. So those two are unlikely to move significantly. It's a pictorial representation, so it's not scored in that sense. It's more of a judgment when it comes to an auditor. But I think when I was at the planning committee, I think someone asked, could you give a more pictorial representation? So this is just a way for trying to do that. I'm happy at a later date to go more maybe into audit risk, because they do. You have significant risks, and we have what we call Scott pluses, then we have material, then we have other. So we have like 4 levels of risk, and the level of audit work that you do on those varies depending on where you are. I mean, some are like the other risk might we just check it to the trial balance. Scott plus, we would do more in terms of their significant class of transactions, is what Scott means. So we look at those in more detail. But we don't then have to do additional audit procedures that you have to do for significant risks. So there's a sort of scale of work we need to do, but they're not scored risk. They're more like they are judgmental in the sense of, as auditors, we look at the whole. You know, this is where we feel we need to focus our work this year, because that's where we think the risks are. You're a well-run fund, so you know, I think we don't have any recommendations for you. Internal audit have given a very the highest opinion they can give. So at the moment, I don't think there's anything you specifically need to be focused on as a pensions committee at this point in time.
Malcolm, are you happy with that response?
Well, it is what it is. I mean, yeah, the diagram does help. So absolutely, that is a very helpful representation of where we are and so on. I guess it's just, I get the point that I'm not saying nothing's in place, but I'm just wondering where this may not be this committee, maybe it's audit, maybe it's something else, to understand what those controls are and who audits those controls. Now, you said, Grant, you said they're in place. Great, fantastic. I wouldn't expect anything less. But is that the role, the remit of any committee to actually delve into that level of detail?
Let James come in, he might be able to answer that.
Yeah, so I think it's a really, really important principle that you're taking us through here. I think it's really important that we as a committee understand kind of the way that this needs to work. So the best way to describe it, I think, is it's called the 3 levels of assurance. And if I just work my way through those very quickly, I think that kind of hopefully explains kind of where we are. So as a committee, you can look at that first level assurance, and that first level assurance is called management assurance. So you can ask me, have we got controls in place around management override controls and level 3 investments? And I can give you all the assurances that I can as the manager of this to say, yes, we have these in place. Okay, you can take that with a pinch of salt, or you can understand that, you can challenge that, you can do whatever, but ultimately it's my management assurance that I'm providing to you. The second level of assurance is basically overview. So this is a point whereby it's not just my opinion. There is something built in within the system that then says it's not just me looking at this. There is a group of people, or a board, or something like that looks at this, that says we are reviewing wider sets of information that would pull out whether those things were an issue. Ultimately, though, you then get the third level of assurance, and the third level of assurance is Adam in terms of the internal audit team, and it's Grant in terms of the external audit team. And they do exactly what you've just said. They are going in, they are completely independent. Now, the really important point here is, although what they look at will be limited because there's a capacity, they can't look at absolutely everything. They have complete access to look at whatever they want. And that's the important principle here. So you, as a committee, need to be relying on Adam and Grant as completely independent. They have that you can speak to them independently, they can speak to you independently. There is no requirement to go through a hierarchy or through management. They are giving you assurance that they have looked at enough of those controls to be able to say, we are willing to give an opinion on this, which is suggests, as Grant just said, this is a well-run fund. That's the opinion that they are forming from this. The question for audit committee is to question that and challenge that and do exactly as you're doing to make sure that you are comfortable that that opinion is appropriate. You won't see the actual controls, you won't see the audit papers that were undertaken. I don't see those, but those are done within those teams. That's where that challenge is, that's where that audit is, and that's the highest level of assurance you can get because it's independent. The issue with these, just going back to the early point, is they are risks, and therefore they will always appear. And as a committee, you should take comfort from the fact that every year these will be looked at, and every year they will be considered. And if, as a result of the conversations here now, Grant goes away and thinks, you know what, I think we might need to look at this in a bit more detail because of the opinion that's coming back from audit committee, he has the opportunity to do that. And therefore, that's appropriate challenge that this committee is making. Does that help?
It does. That's fine. I guess just one final question. So Grant, so you're saying that these risks here are stable. They haven't fundamentally changed year on year. And if they were changing, that's something you would highlight as saying it's going up, it's going down. Is that right?
We would. I mean, I'll be honest and sort of say I think for a pension fund, generally, these risks be fairly stable year on year, given the nature of it. I wouldn't expect them to go up and down, particularly. I mean, maybe if you brought in a completely new administration system 1 year, I might say, well, maybe benefits or new payroll system, I might go, well, benefits payable might go up in 1 year and down in 1 year. But I wouldn't expect them to change. As I say, that they're fairly, whilst we tailor our audit for you, they're sort of generic to the industry as a whole. Just one final thing, just pick up on James, to finish James bit, is how you get confidence on me is that our firm is subject to sort of Financial Reporting Council quality reviews. So our firm's processes for doing the audit are also subject to review, and they're publicly published. So whilst you might not look at my audit file and we have internal, they do get looked at to make sure that myself and my team are doing the job. So, and that then gets fed back. So that's how you sort of get confidence around what we're doing. So.
Absolutely. And just to finalise on that, if I may, Chair, Adam from the internal audit team are suited to the public sector internal audit standards. And that requires, again, a 5-year review, whereby in internal audit's case, CIPFA come in and do an independent review of the standards that are undertaken within there. So you get assurance that the auditors are being audited.
Who's auditing the auditor's auditor? I'm just preempting Malcolm's next question.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm happy with that where we are. Yeah.
Great, thank you. James, you want to take us through item 7, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the final of those the three reports that we're taking together, and this is the annual accounts for 24-25. So it is really important that the internal audit and the external audit opinion are taken into account as part of this, because that's the assurance that you have that the information provided in this within this report is strong. And generally, there has been very good financial performance in the fund this year. and very strong governance, and often those two things go hand in hand. So the fund has increased by £123 million this year, which takes us to just over 2.6 billion in terms of the valuation as at the end of March 25. The accounts were produced by the end of May. This was in line with the Shropshire Council's closed down timeline, again demonstrating that all the work can be done, the processes are tight, and the information can be produced as quickly as necessary. And as Grant has indicated, there is an indication of an unqualified audit opinion around those. The actual statement of accounts is included at Appendix A. Just in terms of the section 8, some of the highlights from those accounts that have been pulled out. As Grant's already talked through, we have that valuation issue around property, debt and private debt, the private equity portfolio and infrastructure as well. Those are the areas where there will always be the variation. If you close the accounts down by the end of May, therefore you have to use the information that's available at that point in time. If you take longer to close them down, well, that's not as good, is it? But you then get later information. So when the auditors come in, they can see that later information is available. What we're saying is that later information is not materially different to the information in the statement, so we don't need to rewrite the statement, which is a lot of work for the sake of literally £4.5 million within a £2.6 billion scheme. Over the year, just to give some context, just over £94 million worth of contributions came in. But just over 21.5 million came in from employees, 73 came from the employers in terms of the employers' contributions. That was phased over 3 years, so that was actually an increase over those 3 years to bring up that level of contribution over the year. What we've also seen is quite an increase, about £6 million in terms of the level of pension strain payments that have gone into the accounts. This is predominantly where there is voluntary redundancy, early retirement cases, whereby a contribution is made into the fund to cover the cost of the fact that that pension is being taken earlier. And obviously within Shropshire Council, as you may know, there was quite a large scale voluntary redundancy scheme over the year, so that would have contributed to that. Overall membership is going up, and as the total amount of pensions that were paid out now in the last year is just over £88 million. This is growing continually, and that's a cash flow issue that needs to be considered as part of that. Overall management expenses over the years, £23.9 million. This is significant, but these management fees will always be significant when you have a scheme that is growing in value, because there is a cost to that delivery of benefit. There's 4 appendices added. Appendix A is the actual statement of accounts. You'll see that in relation to the actual financial statements, they don't start until I think it's page 52 and run for 28 pages, but there's a significant amount of information in the first few parts of the report itself. Talks about the strategic allocation over the year in terms of what those fund managers are, the major shareholdings, the performance and the returns over the year, and we've seen individual manager performance with only property debt and global sustainable equities as the only negative performers over the year. Appendix B is the Grant Thornton draft opinion. So this is what will ultimately be provided in terms of the opinion. Do the accounts give a true and fair view? Are they properly prepared? And does the pension fund represent a going concern going forward? Grant's referred to Appendix B2, which is the consistency opinion. So just to reconfirm, this is a standalone set of accounts. And are they consistent with the ones that are then integrated into Shropshire Council's accounts, which is a requirement? And what that's saying is that yes, they are. And then finally, at Appendix C, we have the letter of representation, which is signed off by the chair and myself, which basically says that all the information has been provided, that we can confirming that that there are no further amendments to the information, and the basis is appropriate for the accounts. So I'm not going to go through the accounts in detail; those are highlighted in the cover report, but they are there at Appendix A. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Sorry, it's me again. I'm hogging it. So a couple of points. So it says 0.14% below benchmark. So A, what is the benchmark? And B, why are we below it?
Right. So the benchmark is effectively what we would expect the fund to return based on the average returns for the investment classes that we're invested in. So we take, obviously we're invested in multiple assets. The benchmark is effectively calculated by looking at the returns that we would expect from all of those assets and coming to a final figure. Why are we slightly below? There's a number of reasons. One of them is because we've got the equity protection in place, and that's causing a drag on our equity performance. We discussed that at the last meeting. That will expire in December. The other thing is some of our investments are actively managed, and those particular managers may fail to meet their particular benchmark, and then that's when we have to actually hold them to account to understand what the reasons are behind that. So the fact that it's so close to each benchmark suggests that overall, yes, we're comfortable with the performance of the fund. We know the underlying reasons as to why there has been a slight performance dip to that benchmark, but that monitoring of active managers is part of what we actually undertake to ensure that.
If I understand you correctly, the benchmark is an average of the expected performance of each asset class. You didn't actually say how that performance for each asset class was measured. I mean, are you taking an industry average for that asset class, or historical experience, or something else?
In terms of the way the actual benchmarks are calculated, each individual asset class will have its own benchmark, which is unique to that asset class. I'd have to go back to find out exactly. If you were looking for me to explain those individual benchmarks, I'd have to actually go back to the reports.
Each asset class has an appropriate benchmark for that asset class. How that benchmark is calculated is dependent on the asset class. For something like equities, it is the market weighted benchmark that's published by MSCI or FTSE. So it is the average, it is the benchmark that is very clear and transparent, and whether managers have beaten that. For most of our assets are invested in global equity, so it's the FTSE Global Equity Index, similar to the FTSE 100 that you see reported, but it's a global index rather than a UK only one. For some of the asset classes, such as the private equity and the illiquid assets like property, they are market average benchmarks of what all of, because it's not possible to have a published benchmark that reflects all the properties listed in the marketplace. Is an average of the property managers who operate in that space. So it's a peer group benchmark. So it's a peer group average, and so it's a mix on each asset class depending on what is appropriate for that part of the fund.
So as I understand it, then all we're expecting our investment managers to do is to match the market averages pretty well.
Overall, that is the biggest driver of performance. So you want your managers to, the asset allocation, what asset class you're in. In some asset classes, that's exactly what we're asking them to do. So legal and general equities, we're just asking them to do the market. In others, we're asking managers to add some incremental returns above that benchmark. And that's on a quarter by quarter basis. They will be volatile. Some will do well in a quarter, some will do bad. Over a 3 and 5 year cycle, you would expect them to outperform and to add value above the benchmark. But it's a small amount, it's an incremental amount rather than the key driver of performance. And that is what Pete does as officer, is monitors them and keeps on top to see the managers are doing their correct job. He is supported there by Central themselves doing that job, but also by Philip and Aon as advisors. And that's the role that we commit, is to trying to make sure those managers are fit for purpose. If they have underperformed their benchmark, why? And if we are not happy with the reasons, to make changes.
It's an interesting concept, this business about returns on investment, but it does seem to me that if you're setting a benchmark, well, for example, you mentioned the main asset class, the equities, 50%, I think, if I remember rightly, of the fund is in that, and you're setting the market average as a benchmark. Well, it should be pretty easy to hit that. You could go into these quasi matching funds for the index, the market index funds, and get that without any effort at all. So we're paying quite a lot of money for investment advice here. I looked at figures. I think it's roughly £20 million a year. Is that right? That's a lot of money to spend just to meet the market average, when you could go out and not do any effort at all and manage that. That's probably a discussion for another day when we're talking about what the benchmarks should be. I'm really interested at the moment in establishing what they are and how they're established. Thank you.
There is a point there around, yes, that's an active versus passive debate that we will look on as part of the strategy review in the future. Moving passive low still has a cost, and you wouldn't save much of that £20 million in fees if we just went passive, because there is still a cost to that. So it would save some, but it wouldn't save all of it. There would still be a significant cost.
James, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think the thing to remember is that we are long-term investors in this, and what we have to remember is we set an investment strategy, and that investment strategy over long term is based on the different classes of assets that we have, spreading that risk, but also the relative performance we're expecting from those. And what we expect in terms of those relative performance is based on the benchmark. That's where you set it to say, if we're going to, if equities are going to deliver 10% a year, and that's better than bonds that deliver 4% a year, whatever the figures were, you'd say, right, but there's additional risk with that. So you want to make sure you're managing the risk. You want to make sure that you are achieving those different benchmarks. On top of that, as Connor said, if you have active managers that are going out and adding the difference and bringing incremental benefit, you'll pay for that. But you pay for that with the benefit that you get, and you don't pay for it if you don't get the benefit that you get. But even the passive, which is literally just moving stocks around to in reflective of the market movements, there is a cost just to moving that money around. When you're talking about multiple millions of pounds and into billions, then the cost of that is significant.
I understand all of that. I'm only really concerned at looking in the future at the overall investment strategy. It just seems to me that it's roughly 1% of the value of the fund is paid out to manage the fund. And these days, that seems to be quite a high figure. But I think that's a discussion for another day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, so this is hopefully a very easy point. On my version of the PDF, on page 78, which is page 154 of the overall pack, this is the audit opinion and certificate. I've got a large blue circle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and on the following page as well. So I can't actually read the audit opinion and certificate.
That's because it's not yet inserted, so that's missing. So that just indicates that has to be inserted. So following, obviously Grant's work, that will be signed off and then inserted, and then the final version of that report will be available. So sorry, that should probably been explained why it's not a typo. It's just to indicate that new information needs to be inserted.
Thank you.
So I think that's part of the, if I'm wrong, recommendations 3.2 once it's concluded. Yeah. So if there's no other questions on that, the recommendations of 3.1 and 3.2, if we're happy to accept those, we have a proposition, please. Paul moved it, seconded. Fiona, all those in favour, please shout. Against? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. Item 8, and Peter's going to take us through this one.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this is the Corporate Governance Monitoring Report. This is one of the standard reports that you'll receive each quarter. So effectively, this looks at the actions taken by the fund's stewardship partners for the previous quarter. And this may be somewhere where we can address your issues in terms of number of pages, Malcolm, because there are a number of appendices to this report that do obviously come each quarter and increase the volume of pages. So if necessary, we can look to change those to links if that would make it easier. But obviously what we don't want to do is we want to make sure that you've got access to that information. So, but it's certainly something we'll take on board, and we'll look as to whether we can include links rather than direct pages. Those that attended the training last Friday on the 12th, hopefully this will be quite familiar to you, because this was the sort of thing that Sheila talked about in terms of how we actually engage with companies, how we actually vote with companies, how we actually use our influence to try and influence companies to change their behaviours and things. Those that haven't seen that particular training, I believe the video has now been shared with everybody. I would encourage everyone just to take that opportunity, and I hope you'll find it interesting in terms of giving background to this particular report. So in terms of what we've got in this particular report, obviously we've got our reports from LGPS Central as our stewardship partner. We've got reports from Columbia Threadneedle as our engagement overlay, and reports from the local pension fund forum, who effectively look at the LGPS as a whole when negotiating and engaging with companies. There's nothing particular I want to pull out of those particular reports for you. It's more that as part of our stewardship, we make sure that the committee is aware of what actions we're actually taking on those particular things. What I'd like to look at today was the public question that was raised earlier in the meeting, which was around the fund's position on Palestine and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. So what I've done is Appendix D to this report, which, if I just check, I think was on page 243, 244. I've set out what the fund's position is in terms of conflict affected and high risk areas. As we stated in the response to the public question, the fund, this isn't a new question, this is something that the fund has wrestled with since this conflict began. We've taken legal opinion back in 2024 through the Scheme Advisory Board. And that confirmed our position that provided we were engaging and taking account of the UN practices around these things, that actually it's our fiduciary duty to make sure that we still look after the benefits of the fund. What we had in this position is now we've had from effectively the Palestine Solidarity Campaign is a conflicting legal opinion. So effectively something that hasn't taken in any reference to that legal opinion that was given previously in November 24, but something that now raises a question as to whether that opinion is correct. So obviously this doesn't just impact Shropshire as a fund, this impacts the whole of the LGPS. We therefore believe, and we are in agreement with SAB, that this position is best handled actually by central government. When the Russia-Ukraine war started, central government were quite clear in terms of what local authority pension funds could invest in, and made a clear statement that we could not invest in Russian companies, and all Russian companies had to be exited at that particular time. No such guidance has been given by central government in respect of the Israel-Palestine situation. So at this particular moment in time, we believe that that statement that we've given in terms of conflict affected and high risk areas remains valid. As a part of what's been now raised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, we have obviously escalated that to the Scheme Advisory Board, and in a moment I'll take you through their latest position. But we believe all our actions that we're taking today are in line with the legal advice we've received, and that there is no risk to the committee. What we will do is be more public about our position. Obviously we have this statement in terms of conflict affected and high risk areas. We haven't actually published that at this particular moment in time. What we intend to do is therefore make that available on our website to make it entirely clear and transparent as to what the fund's position is on this position. So since this report was issued, the SAB did actually come out and give an update yesterday on the position. So in terms of where the Scheme Advisory Board are, they're still awaiting a response from central government. They're still considering whether or not they do need to take additional legal or get additional legal advice on behalf of the LGPS. And they've effectively confirmed at the moment that provided we're following our own responsible investment practices, that they don't see a risk to funds at this particular stage. So what we will do is we will continue to keep the position under review. I think what I would say is this is a highly emotive and a highly subjective issue. And we've probably all got, if we went around the table, we've probably all got slightly different views on what the thing is. What we have to remember is, as a pensions committee, what we're here to do is to protect the fund and to look after what is effectively the financial reputation of the fund. So it's just making sure that we keep those in mind. And it's just to reassure the committee that this is the position we're in. We are taking advice to make sure that that position remains the most effective. And we will update you if anything changes in respect of that. But at this particular moment in time, our plan is to increase our transparency around this. So we publish a formal statement on our website that actually says and lets people know where we stand, lets people know how we treat engagements, and how that we feel that engagement is probably the best way of dealing with this. You will have seen within, so I've got nothing really much further to add to that particular one. I'm happy to take questions on that before I move on to LGPS pooling if you want.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. My apologies for my late attendance. It is a highly emotive subject, and I'd just like to express my thanks to yourself, Pete, and to the rest of the team for making sure that, one, we are very much up to date on the legalities of it and our responsibilities. I welcome the fact that we'll be publishing something more transparent that raises the level of transparency, and I really would like an update at the next meeting should anything change. So just thank you for that.
Charles.
A bit concerned about your statement about protecting the reputation of the fund. The fund is not a marketable commodity. We don't have to worry too much about its reputation. Its job is to simply provide the maximum amount of funds available to pay pensions. I'm also concerned about the reference to the guidance from the government. I'd be very interested to learn on what's the legal basis for that guidance, because we're not talking about trading with the Enemy Act. We're not enemies with Russia. We're not enemies with Israel or anybody else. It seems to me that our decisions here should be based on the best financial results for the fund, and the political issues don't come into it. If the government chooses to advise us as to how we should invest, then there should be some legal basis for that. And I'd like to know very much what it is. If there isn't one, then I don't see why we should be following the government's advice on this. That's something we maybe want to look at when you're seeking your legal advice.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm?
Yeah, sorry. I have a slightly different view, Charles, but that's okay. So I mean, I get the whole. It is a very tricky area, and I get the whole legal side of things. But I think balancing that is the ESG side of things. Yes, we have to maximise the return on the fund. Absolutely agree with that. But also, I guess it's also the wishes of the people who benefit from that fund, the current and the future pensioners, and how do we know, or do we need to know, what their thoughts and their views on this are? Is that something we take into account, that says the people whose money is invested in this account and who we are managing that money on behalf of want or don't want any sort of investment. How is that included in this wider scheme of things?
Individual members are not asked on this, I think.
We haven't specifically gone out at this stage to individual members to canvass of those 50,000 members what their opinion is. Obviously, the committee is open to public questions. We have received a public question today in respect of this, hence my reasoning for actually thinking we need to be more transparent in our approach so that, as you say, members are aware of how we're actually approaching this particular subject.
Okay, I mean, I wasn't expecting 50,000 people to turn up here. We do have a representative or two representatives on this committee. Do we not?
We do.
So I would have thought they would be the channel through which that sort of views, comments, etc., from current and future pensioners would.
We've received no questions through either of these.
Should we actively go and ask, rather than just sitting back saying we've heard nothing, therefore it's all okay, rather than actually saying what are people's views on this?
Look for engagement. I think we'd have to be careful in terms of looking for engagement in terms of what we're actually promising as a result of that engagement.
It's like any kind of survey, isn't it, that you do. Be careful what you ask for, because you might get the answer that you don't want. And then if you don't act on that, you then are seen not to be acting on what members want. Now, there's 5 councillors around the table today, and I suspect there's probably at least 4 different opinions out of the 5 of us, isn't there? And it is a difficult one. And I can understand your point of view. I can understand Charles's point of view. You know, we have got you, Charles. I'll bring you in a second. I personally think we have to look at the fund. We need to look at getting the best return for people who are contributing to the fund now, who are going to be retiring whenever they're going to retire. All different opinions. We've all got different ones. Charles, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The function here is not to be a democratic body, it's to do the best for the fund. As a matter of fact, this argument that the fund belongs to the people who are going to receive pensions is kind of fallacious in a sense. The fund guarantees their pensions. It's actually fundamentally underwritten by the council. Any differences, any shortfalls are met by the council. It's our money, the council's money, rather than the individual pensioners. But as I say, coming back to the fundamental principle, we're here to look after that fund to make sure it performs best, and we should be apolitical. I'm not interested in any other. I mean, I've got lots of personal political opinions, but I'm here to make sure that the fund does its job, which is to obtain the best financial results for the benefit of the fund, and ultimately for the benefit of the taxpayers of this county. That's my view.
Thank you for that. And just for information as well, this is a political committee, and if politics do come into any of the conversations, I will be stopping that conversation quite quickly. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Phil.
Just to try and give you a little bit of wider context, you're absolutely right in terms of saying this is absolutely, frankly, it is a legal minefield. I'm not a legal expert, I'm an investment expert, but nevertheless, I'm involved with a lot of other funds. So this conversation is taking place in many different places at the moment. And that's the advantage of having collective groups like the Scheme Advisory Board that are actually able to go and take legal advice and help feedback to us around that. It's a minefield, excuse me, it's probably the wrong term to use in association to this. And we need to pick our way very, very carefully indeed through it, because there has effectively been a legal challenge to us. So we actually do need to respond to that legal challenge in the appropriate way, at the appropriate time. But rest assured, you know, this is something about this fund, but it's also the wider LGPS. There are a lot of points of principles here, which are vitally important. I'm not going to get drawn at this stage into the sort of aspect of government diktats, because we're subject to quite a lot of that at the moment. But certainly, I think Peter has taken us to a point at which we sensibly have addressed it as best we can for the time being, but it is work in progress.
And just rest assured, any updates that we do have, we will make sure that everybody's fully up to speed with it. Peter, do you want to continue with that? Or?
Yeah, that's fine. So the next part of the report on corporate governance was just around the LGPS pooling. And the purpose of this is just really to keep the committee in the loop as to where we are on the various aspects of pooling. You will note that there is a paper in the exempt section in terms of pooling. The reason why that's exempt is because it contains an awful lot of information that is not yet in the public arena. But I'll take you through this part, which is effectively an update on where we are on the various things. So, as the committee is aware, as part of the reforms of asset pooling, going forwards, our investment strategy will effectively consist of 9 buckets that have been listed by the government. So those cover the things listed at 11.5, from listed equities to UK government bonds. And what we will have is the ability to set our allocation to each of those particular asset classes and a tolerance range for those asset classes. What we won't have as a committee anymore is the direct ability to actually say which geographical areas we want to invest in, or whether we want to invest on an active or passive basis. This has been raised earlier. This is quite a big change for the way things are, and this is quite an awful lot of responsibility. And it was raised earlier when we were talking about how do we ensure that LGPS Central is delivering. We are working with them at the moment to understand how, from the 1st of April, this may actually impact the fund. Obviously, we will work through our strategy in terms of training. We've got training in November and in January before we bring the strategy back to committee in March. But by that time, we should also have greater clarity from LGPS Central as to how they will address some of these issues around risk appetite, around how we actually type of investments we want. Do we see better value in passive investment compared to active investment? Do we see better returns from geographical restricted investment as opposed to global investment? So all of these things we're working through and will be discussed in full with the committee as part of that strategy training. One of the things I think we can do is, in terms of our investment beliefs. So at the moment, our investment beliefs are set within our investment strategy statement. Now, that is something that will be reviewed every 3 years as part of this. So that is something that we will review as part of the investments. But we can make those reviews, those beliefs stronger. So if as a committee we have certain beliefs around the value of passive as opposed to active, or vice versa, we can make those beliefs slightly stronger. And that will put more pressure on Central to deliver against those beliefs. So whilst we won't be able to dictate to them like we have in the past and determine exactly what percentages we want in each particular bucket, our beliefs can actually drive some of those discussions around what's actually happening. Now, as you can imagine, this is a really big change, and what we do need to make sure is that, as we've talked about, is we're safeguarding the fund. The fund is in a good position. The valuation results that are due out later this year will hopefully show that the fund is in an even better position than what it was when it was valued back in 2022. So what we need to ensure is that, having got the fund to this particular position, that nothing is taken as part of the reform of asset pooling actually impacts the future returns. So it's a quick overview in terms of what's happening on the investment side. In terms of local investment, Again, that's still very much something that is under discussion at the moment as to how local investment should be undertaken. The government defined local investment as anything within the footprint of the pool. Now that makes things quite difficult at the moment, obviously with all the changes to pooling. We don't actually know what the footprint of the pool is at this particular moment in time. Obviously we know what the footprint of the 8 existing owning authorities is within LGPS Central. We don't know what the footprint of the potential future shape of LGPS Central might be. So again, that's something that's very much under discussion. But again, as part of the discussions we have around the strategy, as part of the training, we will invite Central back again to actually talk you through their proposals in terms of local investment. And then the final point on the actual governance of the scheme and how that should work. In terms of the changes at scheme level or at fund level, we have no issues. Most of those came out in the SAB's governance guidance a couple of years ago. And whilst that's only just been formally ratified, the scheme was quite forward thinking in terms of actually moving along with those. So most of those have already adopted in advance. In terms of the actual governance of the company, we're actually undertaking 3 side-by-side governance reviews at the moment. So there's a governance review being undertaken in terms of how we actually act as shareholders, what the impacts on that will be if we increase the membership of LGPS Central. There's a governance review of how it will work as a client and how do we hold LGPS Central to account for their performance and their delivery. And then there's a further governance review in terms of how is the actual company itself actually governed, and is there changes that need to be made there if there's changes in scale. So all 3 of those pieces of work are currently ongoing. They're being undertaken by an external firm of accountants, PwC, on behalf of both the partner funds and the company. And once those reports have been issued, then obviously again we will share those with you to keep you in the loop as to what the position is in terms of the governance of LGPS Central. But again, happy to take any questions I can answer in a public forum on pooling at the moment.
Councillors, any questions? No. Are we happy to take the recommendations as they are, 3.1, 3.2, 3.2? We have a proposition proposed by Paul, seconded by Fiona. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? 1 abstention, thank you. Move on to item 9. Vicky, you're going to do this one?
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to a bit of a lighter topic on the agenda, the administration update. This report provides you with information on the work of the administration team. So this is predominantly working with members, paying benefits, and all the other projects that we undertake. Some of the things that we list on this report, it is an obligation for us to report this to committee to make sure that we are delivering what's expected of us, particularly around the pensions dashboard, because that is a kind of statutory programme that we have to make sure that we are delivering the work needed for us to be able to connect to that dashboard once it's made available. There's 2 recommendations in the report to note the progress and completion of the key activities which have been completed in Q1, so that's April to June, and then also the progress on the pensions dashboard. This report will also give you information about the KPIs, about the performance of the team, how well we are performing to those KPIs, and also talk about the other projects that we've completed this year. So annual benefit statements being a really important one, getting those statements out to all active and deferred members by the 31st of August, which we were able to achieve, and then the work that is being undertaken for the valuation process this year. So that happens every 3 years. So there is a lot of additional work on the team this year to deliver for valuation. There's also updates here about regulatory changes that are being discussed or implemented. and those will impact on the work of the administration team, because it will mean we'll have to change or look at doing something different for some of our members. And it's just making sure that you're aware of those changes and how that will impact on the work of the team. So I'm happy if you've got any questions on that report, rather than go into it item by item. If you've got any particular questions about any of the topics, then I'm happy to take those.
Questions, councillors? Paul? Sorry.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And again, my thanks to the team. I know there's a lot to juggle and a lot to do. I just wondered, under the key risks and issues identified on page 264, just wondered if you could just talk to me a little bit around, or talk to the committee a little bit around the first one that's identified as medium, what to use for find data and how, and I'm assuming additional voluntary contributions information will be accessed. Just wondered if you could just give me a bit of an update around that.
For pensions dashboard?
Yeah.
Yes, so for pensions dashboard, people will log into a system, a dashboard, and they'll put in personal information that will then link them to pension schemes that they've got held with all providers. So depending on how good our data matches to what they put in, if everything matches 100%, it's a clean find, it comes to us. There's no additional work, in the sense that if somebody put in data and it didn't exactly match, and it was a partial match, it would mean that member would have to come to us and ask, have I got benefits held at Shropshire? It looked like I might have, but it wasn't 100%. And we would have to return information to that member within a 10-day turnaround to say, yes, you're with us or you're not with us. So the implication for us is to make sure that our data is as clean as possible and as up to date as possible. So one of the main issues we have with members is that those that aren't currently contributing, so they're deferred, don't always keep in touch with us about moving address. And address tracing is one of the biggest areas that we have to clean data regularly. So that's one of the areas that we'll focus on, and it's one of the areas that we'll use as find data. So a member will put in their address. If it doesn't match because we haven't got the latest address, that might come back as a partial match. So it's just making sure that our data is as clean as possible, is as up to date as possible, to limit the amount of extra work it might cause us on partial matches. That makes sense.
It does. Thank you for the explanation. And so I suppose what I'm now asking is, that's always very tricky. 50,000 members, not everybody has all the information supplied. People move jobs, they move area, etc., etc. It's an ongoing challenge. Are we doing everything we can possibly do to make sure that data is as clean as, given the impact that it has when it isn't clean? Do we feel comfortable that we're doing as much as we can?
So there's one additional item of work that we're going to introduce on an annual basis, and that is address tracing. We don't currently do that regularly. We've done it as a big one-off project at some point, but we need to incorporate that as an annual process. When we're talking about address tracing, obviously, when we talk about the membership being 50,000, it's split by thirds. So you've got a third active. So we'd expect active members via their employers or themselves to be keeping us informed of any personal changes on address. For deferred members, that's the group where we kind of lose track sometimes. And then the other third, the pensioners, we would also assume that they're keeping us up to date. They have access, as do all of the membership, to the Engage portal, where they can go in and update personal details, 24/7, 365 days. So that's there for them to keep us up to date with information as well. So the address tracing is key, though, to pick up those people that have lost contact with us, and keep the records up to date there.
And if I may, again, sorry, Chair, because it's really helpful to understand that. So I'm guessing that not having, as we said, data that's not having up to date data because members haven't kept us up to date, not for any other reason, because members haven't kept us up to date, that essentially will impact on the communications being sent out as well, won't it? So
yes, so what we tend to do with those members, we've got two ways to communicate now. If some are registered on the Engage portal, and we can send communications via that those means via email. For those that aren't, we always write out to last known address. Once we've got confirmation that they're no longer there, we can do tracing. We don't kind of do that all of the time for members. We will do it when a benefit is becoming payable and we need to trace them because we need to pay things out to them. So
that's really reassuring. Thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles.
Just this is intriguing a little bit, but these days most people have an email address, and I imagine you probably have a facility for recording that in the system. Is there a program whereby you routinely, maybe once a year, communicate with that email address with a reminder? Please update your. I'm just wondering if you do that or not.
Yes, we do. So we have a facility called Gov Delivery where we do bulk communications. So we will communicate quite regularly via emails held on record. So yeah, we do that all the time.
Malcolm.
Yeah, hi. Appendix A KPI table,
yeah.
Page 253, talks about active and deferred KPIs, etc. And the legal target of 2 months. The one that stands out is the communication issued to deferred benefit options, which is below 50%
yes.
of the deferred of the legal target. Now, obviously, I understand the point about deferred members you just talked about, but deferred are included on some of the other KPIs. So why is that one standing out?
So deferred members, this is a process where we are notified that somebody has left the scheme. And we need to send a letter out to them to confirm the current value of the benefit, so the benefit that they've built up to their date of leaving. That is quite a high volume area of work, and we have resourced that better this year. We've got more people working on that KPI. They started earlier in the year, so they've been going through a training programme, so they're starting to pick up that work, and hopefully we'll see that KPI improve. The other area connected to that is, even though we might have been notified that somebody's left, there may be other items of work that need to be completed before we can then process them as a deferred case. A lot of the time now, we have people moving in and out of jobs, and they'll move from one place to the other, and we have to try and combine that information before we can then defer it. And that can be held up. So we have information coming from other funds, and we have internal aggregations, they're called, combining the records that has to happen, and that can also delay that deferred process. So as I said, we have resourced that better this year, so we should see that KPI improving through the year.
Okay, thank you. And just one quick follow-up then. The fact that there's a legal target for these, so what's the penalty for not meeting a legal target?
So the legal penalty is that we're not meeting disclosure requirements, and in that sense we should kind of report ourselves to TPR, to the pensions regulator, if it's materially significant. So it is looking at the numbers across employers, and who we do have issues with employers supplying information to us for that timescale as well. So we're constantly looking at how we work with employers to get the information that we need, so that we can process these cases quicker.
Okay. Questions? No, happy to take that. So recommendations, we've got 3.1, 3.2. Take those together. Proposer. Paul. Yeah. Seconded. Fiona. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Thank you. One abstention. Right, that takes us on to item 10, which is the exclusion of public and press. To consider a resolution under paragraph 10.2 of the Council's access to information procedure rules that the proceedings of the committee in relation to items 11 to 18 shall not be conducted in the public on grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the categories specified against them. Do we have a proposer to exclude the press and public? Thank you, Paul. Seconded. Fiona. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.